So, when we were talking about what this conference was going to be about, and we named it, aging in we did this last year as a group. Remember, we changed aging in the right place, like Mr. Gallant said. Dr. Gallant's book was Aging in the Right Place. I said, I don't like the whole right or wrong thing, right? He's definitely on par with what he says in his book. And I like the word best, right? Because there is no right or wrong in what we do. There's only the best at that moment, right? So aging in the best place. So when we named this conference and kind of taglined this conference, I said, what should we be talking about to help us recognize and to help our clients recognize what it means to age in the best place? And those of you who have been through the Downsizing Coach Skills Training have got a little bit of a piece of this. Hi, Kim. And somebody help Kim out with where a table might be, have an open seat. Yeah, there we go. And so, how many of you have been through the Downsizing Coach Skills Camp? Raise your hand. Look around. Let's see. Okay, great. Yep. So, in this room, we've got several people who have, and some recent graduates. Jan, like you just finished it up this month. Yay, right? And in that program, we talk about downsizing coaching, right? How to be a really strong, effective downsizing coach. And I think that has been the kind of the path that we've taken, because you take the Success in Seniors Real Estate class and you get the basics about building your business and what it means to serve the senior client, and then you go, okay, man, there's more complexity to this than I bargained for, and sometimes you bump into obstacles. And then we introduced the Downsizing Coach Skills Training to kind of help people coach people through those obstacles. And then this year I said, we've got to talk a little bit more, because here's what we said last year. This was the slide we had last year. Remember? Help, I need a guide, right? That's our client. And they needed a guide. And they're out there and they're looking at the terrain and they're looking at the map, if you will, that they have in their mind about senior living options and how to move out of a house they've lived in their entire adult lives sometimes, right? They've raised their kids there, or they had a spouse that passed away there, and they have all these things that remind them of that. And they really need a guide, and we've said, we can do that. That's us, right? I'm a real estate agent, but man, I'm also a CSHP. And so I have this unique skill set that other people don't have, and I'd like to help you with this. I'm prepared. I'm ready. And you got your map, right? And then we get this. Wait, slow down. I'm not ready. I know you have a map, and I know you have a compass, and I know you have a vehicle, and I know you're prepared, but I'm not ready yet. Yeah? How many of you have heard that? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah, okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't just me. Okay. And so we're hearing this a lot, and it's coming up on our monthly calls. It comes up when we're discussing the downsizing coach training, the people, what is your biggest obstacle? It's the people I meet with who clearly need to do something different, but they're just not ready. And by the time they are ready, now it's a crisis, right? And that's a dilemma that we all face. And so I see this and I go, okay, what's next, right? Like, what's next? And that's what this particular talk this morning is about. And I just want to address and really give a shout out to David Soley. And, I'm going to just kind of show you my book. I told Shannon, I said, we need a clean book to put up here at the front, because this one is pretty ratty. And frankly, Jim, we need a picture of this, because I want David Soley to have, I want to send this to him, and I'm going to tell you why. Because David wrote this book in 2004. I can't believe it's been that long, right? I didn't get a hold of it until sometime after that. Like, it had already been published for a while. And when I read it, I went, man, he gets it, right? How many of you believe that, right? Like, when you read the book, you go, he gets it, right? And mine's pretty ratty because I kind of use it as a Bible. Like, I use it as a guide. I use it in everything that I do. And this talk really is about taking his work and applying it to what we do specifically. So here's the quote that he has in the book on, I think, what does it say, page 19? Yeah. So seniors' developmental tasks compel them to maintain control over their lives in the face of almost daily losses and simultaneously to discover their legacy or that which will live on after them. I describe this conflict as needing to hang on tight while also to let go to discover the meaning of their lives, right? Now, we're not talking about the boomers, the ones who retire and their kids have flown the coop and they go, woohoo, moving to Sun City, right? Not that group, right? It's not even really the group who has made an elective, proactive decision to move to a CCRC, and they're excited about that. It's the next group, right? It's the group who waited, and now their options are somewhat limited, and they're having to really sacrifice a lifestyle, and they're having to face some things they've never faced before. It's funny, I'm teaching a class at University of Central Oklahoma in general psychology to a group of 18 and 19-year-olds, right? Freshmen. Now, keep in mind, for the last decade or two, my audience has been you guys and older adults, retirees. And the first day of class, I walked in and looked around and went, what have I done? Because they know nothing, right? At 18 and 19-year-old, think about it. Those of you who have kids that age or grandkids that age, right? I'm looking around and I'm like, oh my Lord. They think they know everything, and we thought we knew everything, but I know better now, right? And so what's interesting about that is, okay, so this is funny. So the one of the chapters that I have to teach is on memory, and just how unreliable our memory actually is, right? I'm not talking about dementia unreliable. I'm just talking about unreliable. Like, you guys can't, unless you've looked at pictures in the last 24 hours, I bet you $100 you can't tell me what I was wearing at conference last year, even though I was up here for 2 days straight, right? You don't remember. Why? It wasn't important, right? You filtered it out. Okay, probably most of you can't remember what you had for lunch yesterday, right? Okay, unless you were obviously here, in which case you might remember. So I'm standing there and I'm looking at this classroom full of younger people, and the textbook, I kid you not, says, ask the students where they were when the airplane hit the World Trade Center tower. We just had what year anniversary of that? 20. The 20th year anniversary of that. And so I asked the question, and then I went, and they're all looking at each other. And I said, how many of you were even born? There were 2 students that were born. One was a sophomore, one was a freshman. They were like a year old, or a sophomore and a junior. They were a year old when that happened. And I said, do you remember it? And they were like, no. I was like, I didn't think so. Right? We forget, right? Time flies, doesn't it? Right? Time flies. And so I had to come up with a new something that they might remember, and I couldn't think of anything. Like, I'm like, what could have possibly happened 10 years ago? Like, and I couldn't think of anything, right? Because I just didn't have, it wasn't there. So in neurolinguistic programming, they talk about the map is not the territory. Have you guys heard that phrase? Okay, write this down. This is going to be important. The map is not the territory. So let me go back to my little map here. So let's use this one. All right, so assume for a second that all of our clients, when we meet with them, they have what they think in their mind is a map, right? This is a map of how things are supposed to look. It's a map they're used to, it's a map they've seen before, it's a map they recognize, they have it memorized, and some of them may even have somewhat of a map on paper, like a guide, if you will, of how to grow older, right? What is that map based on? Their past experience, but also what? if it's my map, what is that map based on? My past experience and your beliefs, but it's also based on the past experiences of what other people have taught you, right? And so what is the experience of most of our elders as it relates to where you live when you get older? Nursing homes, or say again? Stay where you are, or with family. I heard somebody say with family, right? So those were the three big options, right? Either with family, or we move to a nursing home, or you stay where you are and you just deal with it, right? That's their map. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if you were to take their map and rewind 20, 30 years in the past and take a look at what their parents' map looked like, what would their options be? Who said none? Yeah, there were no other options. It was you just stayed where you were, and that was your option, okay? So their map looked different than the people we're dealing with now's map. What does our map look like? What does the map for today look like? Anything is possible, right? You can stay where you are. You can live with your kids. You can live in a flat out back of your kids. You can move to Sun City and you can live in luxury, or you can stay put where you are and live in luxury. Or there's so many options, right? CCRCs and assisted living and long-term care. And all of a sudden, they went from a map with 3 options and knowledge of a map with no other options to a map that is, let's use the word overwhelming. Yeah? Okay, so as a downsizing coach and a CSHP, you guys are prepared, right? You got this. Okay, so with that map, let me ask you, how many of you have ever been to a new city that was really kind of outside your comfort zone? Like for me, I'm small town kid, so where would that city be? Kim, where would that city be for you? Prague. Okay, see, I can't even go that far, like in my mind. Like, really? Where was yours, Allison? Seoul. Okay, so especially international travel, right? Who else had one that they said would be overwhelming for them? Willie? Atlanta. Right. Yeah. So when we went to New York City, it was overwhelming for me. Let's say when I went to New York City. So, fun story. I went to John Maxwell exchange program there. John Maxwell, the author, he had a coaching certification, did the certification, was invited to go to exchange. It's an intimate group, kind of like this, of people who go to this. Very, very expensive. We stayed at the Ritz, so the accommodations were very expensive. And one of the day trips that we took was to the World Trade Center ground zero before the memorial was built. So this was like right after it happened. Like it was still dirt and they were still building it. And so I'm with a group of probably 20 people, give or take. We go through and they show us what they're building and they give us the lowdown on how it's so interesting. And we leave and we're headed back to the hotel for the next session. And now I'm in New York. I'm a small town kid from Oklahoma. And all I could do was look up. Like, wow, everywhere I looked were tall buildings. And so we're walking back to the hotel. Where is my group? I lost my people. And I thought, well, they got to be here somewhere. And I'm looking, I'm like, they're gone. And I'm standing here with, this was pre-iPhone, I think. No real, like I didn't Google my hotel to find it. And so I just kept walking. I thought, surely I'll run into it, right? That's what you do in Oklahoma. You just keep walking until you see it. Well, that didn't work very well. And I found my way in kind of a back, like, I wouldn't say, it may have been an alley, but it didn't feel like an alley because there's tall buildings everywhere. And there was a parade, like preparing, like staging area for a parade. And all these people in costumes and come to find out, they just won a big baseball game. Who's my baseball people? What's the big game that people win in baseball? Thank you. It was a ticker tape parade honoring some baseball win. The Yankees or the Mets. And I'm not a baseball person, but I recognize the fact that this was a big celebration, and they're all and so I'm like, well, maybe somebody here will know where I need to be. So I walk over to who looks like the safest, sober people in the line, and it was a group of police officers and firefighters in kilts with bagpipes, some of them. And they were waiting to go, and I said, okay, you guys could help me. I am lost. And they're like, really? Where are you from? I'm like, you don't think I'm from here? I don't know why. And they said, where are you looking for? I said, the Ritz. And they went, well, we're not from here. We live wherever they live. So they were just there for the parade. And I said, well, surely you can help me get to the Ritz. And they're like, no, we have no idea where the Ritz is. And they said, but that guy probably can. And there was a guy on a horse, a police officer on a horse, who was patrolling the area. And I thought, perfect. So I went over to the guy on the horse, and I said, I'm looking for the Ritz. And he goes, okay, which one? I said, you've got to be kidding me. There's more than one Ritz in New York. He said, yeah. And he thought, you little country bumpkin, poor thing. And I said, well, I know my room overlooks the water. He goes, oh, okay, I know exactly where you need to go. You go up here, you turn left, you go 2 blocks, etc. And he gave me exact directions. I was like, oh, thank heavens. So I made it back to my hotel. But in the course of doing that, think about how many people I had to encounter. And I had to question, could I trust them? Right? Think about all the dynamics that went into me finding my way back to a hotel, which, by the way, I thought would be pretty easy to find. But my map was not the terrain. You guys get it? Right? The terrain was much bigger. The terrain was unknown, first of all, to me. Now, I am sure there is a map somewhere for that terrain, yeah? But did I have it? No, I didn't have it. The guy on the horse had it, thankfully, and I was thankful to find him, right, before I ended up wandering myself someplace to where I probably shouldn't have been because I didn't know my way around. And the parade was just a bonus, right? The parade was just a bonus. When I bumped into that group of people, it was really kind of interesting because I chatted with them for a couple minutes. After I talked to them, I didn't feel as scared as I felt when I was really lost. And then I was like, okay. And so, you know, if I had to go back, and again, memory is fallible, but my memory of this is that it was loud and that everybody else seemed to know exactly where they were supposed to be. They were happy and content and knew where they were supposed to be. I was the only one that was lost. And the buildings were so tall. Right? Have you guys been to downtown Oklahoma City? We have one building that's tall, and it was just built a few years ago. And it's not even probably a third as tall as the buildings in New York. And so my map did not serve me well, right? My map did not serve me well there. So how many of our clients are dealing with the same problem, right? They have a map, and they keep looking at it, and they're studying it, and they are L-O-S-T, lost, right? Lost. And looking for a what? A guide. Now, are they just lost trying to find a place to live? Or are they lost in more than that? They're lost in much more. They don't even really know how to live at this point, because how many of you in this room have lived to be 90? Okay, nobody that I know of. And we'd like to, is that what you said? Yeah? Oh, not yet, right? Yeah, so the people that I talked to at our Senior Living Seminar series, when I say, how many of you have you lived to be 90 before? Like, wait a minute, I'm confused. No, you can't have done this yet, right? So, and most of us don't even have a map with people who have done it, who have created a map for us. So the terrain is very new. So what David Sully talks about in his material, it to me made total sense. He said, professionals like us that are, whether in his world they're financial services people or attorneys or anybody really that's in a professional capacity who has the ability to meet with people and have intimate conversations with them about their lives, have the ability and the opportunity to be legacy coaches, right? And so you can be a downsizing coach, or you could be a CSHP and help people with real estate transactions, or you could be a legacy coach. And can you be all three of those things, yes or no? Yeah, right? So being a legacy coach encompasses all of those things, whereas being a downsizing coach really is being a downsizing coach and a real estate agent, and being a real estate agent is just being a real estate agent, right? But when you think of yourself as a legacy coach, you really can do all three of those things in one bundle, right? Like in one opportunity. And I used a whistle because when I think of coaches, I think of whistles, right? Sports metaphor. But it was funny because I was playing with some images and the whistle made sense, because how many of you have been with a client and you just want to blow a whistle and say, stop, time out, right? I feel like I need to wear a whistle every time I go to a consultation. I had Jan Brito and the others that went through the downsizing coach skills training recently. We do a role play. We call it a practice session, and they have to be the coach, and I play the role of the client, and we do a Zoom call, and they have to coach me through to a stopping point. And at the end of it, I say, okay, stop. I'm going to take my role play hat off, and we're going to go and we're just going to debrief this. And I think it was Jan, and she goes, gosh, you are all over the place. Like, you're really good at playing one of these older clients, right? And it's by intent, right, that I do that, because they are all over the place sometimes, right? And what they're looking for is someone to say, stop, blow the whistle, tell me what the next play is that I need to run, right? Now, we're in college football season here in Oklahoma. Some of you are pro football people, but we're college football people here. And so it's play after play after play. And the quarterback is calling the plays, and he's coordinating with the coach on the sidelines, who's coordinating with the coaches up in the box, right? And the players on the field are just doing what they're told, right, for the most part, right? Like, go out and do what you learned in practice. And what I love about what David Sully says is that you're not a legacy coach. This is not a solo proposition. You're not the only one in their life that should be a legacy coach, right? Everyone around them should be aware that we all need legacy coaches, yeah? Right? How many of you are in that phase of life yourself where you're kind of going, I don't really know what's going to be next for me? Anybody besides me? Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, am I going to retire or am I not going to retire? Am I going to travel? Am I not going to travel? Am I going to grow my business, or am I going to just kind of scale it, right? There's all those questions. So I think a lot of people are going through that, not when you're 90, but those of us who are in the business realize that we need to be doing that sooner and not later, and so we're trying to practice what we preach. We'll be talking a lot about that here in a little while. Hi, you guys. Good morning. And so our panelists are here for the next panel, so they're going to come in, and I'm going to have to taper my comments because I really don't know if I want them to hear what I'm going to say this morning. No. I'm just kidding. They all know me very well, yeah. And so some of them could probably teach this class better than me. So let's talk about what legacy coaches do real quick. This slide, I think I had it up just a few minutes ago, but let's just kind of talk through it. This is in Sully's book, so I've given you the reference to the pages, page 89 on this one. So understand what the age-based agenda of older adults looks like and how they express it. Manage the control issues, ask meaningful life review questions, listen attentively, and reinforce the values in their answers, and facilitate the predictable dilemmas that people face, okay? Now, not everyone is facing the same dilemma, correct? Right? People who are married have different dilemmas than people who don't. People with children have different dilemmas than people who do. People who have children who get along have different dilemmas than people who have children who don't get along, yeah? So our job is to be listening for and paying attention to what the dilemmas are. And how is this any different than real estate, by the way? It's not. We're taught in real estate to pay attention to what the obstacles or objections are, yes? This is the same thing. The only difference is we're listening for obstacles and objections that may be unrelated to real estate. And we really weren't taught that in real estate school. Okay? Now maybe to a certain degree, but not to the same degree. So what are the dilemmas that Soli points out when he talks about getting older? And he says actually getting old. That's why I put it on the screen. And now that I look at it, I don't like the way it reads. But so let's say older. So where will we live? That's the first dilemma, right? Where are we going to live after we retire and as we get older, or after we lose a spouse or whatever, right? Where are we going to live? How can I manage my health? How will I cope all by myself if that should happen, or let's say it has already happened? What should I do about money? And what is the right way to say goodbye? Now I want to highlight what is the right way to say goodbye. Goodbye to what specifically? Stuff, absolutely. What else? The house, yes. What else? The lifestyle, the neighbors, people, right? And so, people who work in hospice are really, really good. If they're really good at helping people say goodbye to their family, to their friends, to the people who matter to them, right? And that's a very end of life conversation that people have, right? The few days, weeks, or months right prior to somebody passing. We're not at that point, right? We're dealing with an in-between stage. And I think what's interesting is people take it for granted. They think, oh, I'm going to up and move. Somebody told me the other day, who was it? Somebody told me, a professional colleague said they were going to move to Florida. And, we were in St. Louis, and a colleague, Robin, there said, we're thinking we're going to move to Florida. And they're in St. Louis. And I'm like, really? Have you been to Florida for any extended vacation time, like more than just a week or two? No, when we go, we're usually there a week or two on vacation. I said, okay. Now, I have a map of that because we have done it twice. Where do we live now? Not in Florida. Nothing against Florida, love Florida. My map of Florida before I moved to Florida was different than my map of Florida after I moved to Florida. So I shared with her, she needs to go down there and spend some time there first before she says goodbye to her life in St. Louis and makes a complete life change. And she's like, I really hadn't thought about that. And I said, well, would you like to talk about it? Because not everybody wants to hear that. Some people just want to do it, which is totally fine. Go do it, right? Like, Catherine, your kid just did that, right? Your son? Yeah. How old is he? He's 30. Is he married? No, he's single. Let him do whatever the heck he wants to, right? It's called an adventure. Yeah, and that we learn through adventures. That's what Chris and I did. But when you're 60, 70, 80, do you really want to have an adventure? Or do you really kind of want some consistency in your life? Donna's saying, yes, give me some adventure. Okay, so think about, I don't have one, but think of the bell curve. Okay, think of the bell curve. And in the middle, what do you have? Average. The average person or couple or family doesn't want adventure. They want some adventure. They call it vacation. Okay? Then on the one side of the bell curve, you have people who don't want to go anywhere, right, Jake? I'm going to stay home. I'm going to hang out here. I love it, love it, love it. It feels really good. And I can have my own little adventure right here in my backyard. And then on the other side of the bell curve, you have the people who go to Prague and Seoul. And where's my Uganda person, right? Okay, so there are people who have big adventures, right? People who have vacations, and then people who just jump off the deep end, and move to Key West and stay there, right? And we call those old hippies, right? And Chris and I are thinking about becoming one. So there's all kinds of people. Well, how do you know what that person's level of risk that they're comfortable with is, right? How do you know? Unless you ask. What we do is we assume we know. And so some people are like, I am ready to go. I want to move to a CCRC. That sounds great. It sounds perfect. They have done zero research. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into. They get there and they go, oh, what have I done? Other people have done their research. They've done their advanced planning. They kind of know. They've done their homework, and they move in and they go, yeah, this is exactly what I expected it to be, with a few things here and there that aren't exactly right, okay, according to my map. All right, so then we're going to revisit this real quick, just from last year. I know those of you who saw this last year, this will be a repeat. But remember, anytime we make a change in life, we go through stages of readiness. And so in particular, the people that we're serving are in either some stage of denial in the beginning. Just by a show of hands of the people in the room right now, how many of you right now are saying, I am never moving from where I live. I am staying put no matter what, under any circumstances for the rest of my life? Raise your hand. Frida, she just built her forever home. She's built her forever home. Okay, so none of the rest of you are saying that. Why? Because you want to move to Florida. You're ready for an adventure. That's the phase of life you're in, right? Okay, so the rest of you are saying the reason you're not saying you're in denial is because you're in the business. And you see too many other people who have said they're not doing it, and then because of circumstances have had to do it. And so you're holding out. Somewhere in your mind you're saying, I might need to do this or choose to do this, right? Then there are people who are planners, and they're planning, or they've gone through the phases and now they're planning. And so they're planning for what next steps are. And this is where, in real estate, guys, we haven't been taught how to deal with this group. Most people, as real estate agents, they go into the house of a planner and they go, oh, if they're not doing something in 30 days, I'm not interested in even having the conversation, right? But how do people create a new map if they don't have a guide to help them create a new map while they're planning? They're still working off the old guide. And then we have the action group, the people who are in the action state, right? So they're taking action. Those are the ones realtors love, right? Because the time that you meet them to the time you get paid is short, right? And then you've got the people who have done something, they take action. We often forget about this phase, which is called validation. Realtors have a tendency, typical realtors, not you guys, but typical realtors get their commission check, they go back to their office, they process the file, and they put them on a drip campaign, maybe, that touches them once a year, right? But what we have to remember is that if we're going to function as not just real estate professionals, not even just CSHPs, but as legacy coaches, there's also a validation phase that people go through. I'll give you a quick example. Our friends that just moved to Dallas, Rick and Jean Dunleavy, they moved to Dallas in a CCRC. They're a high-rise, a beautiful luxury high-rise CCRC. Matter of fact, Angela and her team helped us with that. It was a great collaboration between teams. And Jean really wanted to do it. She was so excited. She used to live in Dallas, and so she was really thrilled. Her husband was a little more tentative. He had never lived anywhere else, and he was reluctant, but not against it. He was for it. So they moved down there. They got settled in, and they'd been there they've been there since, what was that, April or May, something like that, April. And we find out just a month or two ago that Rick wasn't really himself. Like, Jean was concerned about him, and he wasn't getting up in the morning. He seemed really depressed. They were concerned he had some cognitive issues, which he had not really had leading up to that. So they did all kinds of tests, went to all kinds of doctors, concluded that he was just depressed. And we're kind of like, well, what happened, right? Because they were so excited about the move, and he was meeting people and making new connections and going to things. And but what we didn't realize was he had, right before they moved from Oklahoma City, he had been working as he's an attorney, retired attorney now. He was still working a few days a week, going into the office, doing what he did, had a secretary there, would come home, had his office at the house set up, piddle around in there doing various different things. And it wasn't for the money. He was doing it to stay busy and keep his mind active, and he enjoyed the people. And so when he moved to Dallas, he had to stop doing that. So he closed his office at the same time he moved to Dallas, and they uprooted everything and moved. He also had friends in Oklahoma City that obviously he couldn't connect with easily when he was in Dallas and that kind of thing. So then we found out, randomly, Chris and I went down to Dallas to see them because we were so concerned, but I was in there talking to him in his bedroom, and I remember when we were setting it up that he had a CPAP machine. And I said, Rick, I said, where's your CPAP machine? He said, oh, I don't know. I'm not using it. It doesn't work right. Oh, how long have you not been using it? Since July. Oh, geez. Well, no wonder you've got some issues. Let's get that thing out and let's make it work. All right, well, by now we're too far down the path. Now, that's a medical issue, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but I know enough to know that that's a problem, okay? So we're talking, and in talking to Gene, this had been a steady decline that was uncharacteristic, that none of us thought about, and until it reached a point where it was really problematic, she didn't even mention it to anybody, because she didn't want to bother us. You guys get that? Okay, she didn't want to cause anybody else any problems. She didn't want to have anybody, go out of their way to help. But I look at that and I feel like I failed them, because in the validation stage, really, that's when we got to stay in touch. That's when we got to make sure that people are still feeling what they felt, right? For about a year, you guys, right? Just for the record over there, those of you, about a year, right? It's that transition period. It's the honeymoon phase has to end, right? The excitement, the thrill, the reestablishment, all that stuff, and then there becomes complacency, like, okay, well, now what, right? That middle mundane period, and then real life happens. Okay, then you settle in. So that validation phase is so important from a legacy coach standpoint. So you got to build systems into that, right? And that's where we're at now. It's like, okay, yeah, we hadn't really been thinking about that. It's not really our job, right? But if you're going to be a legacy coach and you see yourself in that role, then it really is part of your job. Now, not by yourself. It's not your job by yourself. Who else's job is it? Their kids, their family, the senior living community, all their friends, people, right? So this is where now, can we coach people on things to look for, right? To pay attention to, yeah, right? And so instead of just going, okay, well, your house is closed, congratulations, we'll see you in a year, or we'll see you at the next event. How about saying, I'm going to check in on you once a month and just see how you're doing, and I want honest answers. I don't want oh, it's great, it's wonderful. I want to know if it's bad, why you think it's bad, what's going on. And you're not just listening for content, you're listening for context, right? You're listening for everything. How is this playing out? Because a lot of people do, and I have a study on this I'll send out to all of you when we get finished with the conference. It's on grief as a result of relocation. And they call it, there's a lot of names for it, right? There's a lot of different names for it. But there is a grief that can happen. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, particularly if someone is moving and other stuff is happening. It's not just a move. They're moving out of town, they're moving out of their comfort zone, and other things are happening. So what are some of the challenges we have with doing this? These will all look very familiar to you. Sully has these in his book. So time constraints is our biggest challenge, right? Finding the time to do this. And we've got to build that time into our lives. Not really knowing anything about the client or their background. So when we're meeting with people, we are typically, as real estate professionals and even CSHPs, we're interested in the transaction details, right? What's going on in the transaction that we need to know about? What obstacles? We've got to open it up because we don't know anything about the client and their background generally. We don't know about the bigger picture, so we've got to know a little bit about that to be able to be a legacy coach. History with the client, that's a challenge. We don't have history with them. It takes a little longer to build rapport with some people. So all of these things that are on that list are essentially the challenges. The last one on the list, you might want to put a star by it. David Sully in his book refers to uncoupling. He uses a technical term. I just call it ghosting. People ghost you, right? You go out on an appointment, You met with them, you thought it went really well, you create a plan. Now they won't call you back. Now they're not returning your call. They won't return the calls at the senior community. They won't return your calls. You don't know what's going on. You're a little bit worried. And they call that, in his book, he calls it uncoupling. And usually what happens there is that goes back to the map I showed you earlier where they go, stop, I'm not ready yet. And that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means that they've got stuff they need to work on or deal with before they're ready for you in what they think you are able to do for them. So when you have that, what do, right? So he's got a few recommendations in his book that might be helpful for you. And this is not just after the move. This is all the way through from the very beginning to the end of the conversation. So the first thing is be mindful of the age gap. And that really kind of depends on how old you are and how big of a gap there is. I started doing this when I was 27. So some of you guys have kids and grandkids older than that, right? Think about one of your grandkids walking in and saying, I have the map to help you with this. Sure you do. Acknowledge the fact that you may not seem like you're mature enough to have this, but if you've already got gray hair, like Chris does, it's not as big a deal. Right? When I turned 50, that's okay. You'll get used to it, Rob. I throw him under the bus a lot. It keeps him awake back there. Yeah, that's what he'll tell you. That's what he'll tell you. Yeah. But he didn't get to be on the stage. See? Yeah. So truth be told, though, when I turned 50, you know what I realized? I had earned my right to talk to people. I had earned my seat at the table. But before that, so Danielle, you guys that are still in your 30s, right? You've got to be aware that you may not, in their minds yet, have earned your right to be in that conversation. So you have to just be honest with them and say, look, I don't know that I have all the answers, but I do have some things that I can help with, right? And here's how that looks. He says you also have to keep the horse before the cart, right? In other words, know what the priorities are. And we go in sometimes thinking that the priority is selling their house. And that's not always the priority, right? Get your staff on board. Also, make sure that they know that what's going on. So don't assume, like Naomi has gotten, she's trained me pretty well. She does a lot of our phone calling, right? So she's the one that's on the phone with people. And so when I leave a consultation, what I do is I pull my phone out, I do my voice record button, I transcribe my meeting with that person, what was going on, what the issues are, what my concerns are, what I think we need to pay attention to, and then she puts it in the database, okay? And the reason that we do that, and hopefully, I don't know that we're always really good at this, but hopefully our team looks at those notes before they make their phone call to that person, right? So that we're all aware of what might be going on in their lives, and we're not all tripping over each other. The other thing is use your legacy coaching skills to promote life review. What do I mean by that? So by the way, let me just explain to you the worst people to do this with, the most times the ones that we're worst with is our own family. Okay? I can tell you my dad called on Sunday. He called on Sunday. He calls on Sunday sometimes because he knows I work during the week, and he's also off on Sundays. So he called and he said, talk to me a little bit. After the phone call, Chris comes in and says, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated were you with your dad? I said, what makes you say that? He said, I could just tell in how you're talking with him. Well, I was very frustrated with my dad. It's harder to be good at coaching with my dad than it is my clients. I'm really good. I'm patient with my clients, right? I'm not patient with my parents. So if you were to translate what David Sully's talking about is be a legacy coach, not just with your clients, but with your family. And I'm practicing that, right? I'm practicing. I'm better. I said it was a 2 or so on the scale, not a 9 or 10 on the scale, which it used to be, right? Because I'm paying better attention to the fact that I'm smarter than my dad. He should know this by now, right? I know all the answers, and he doesn't understand that I know all the answers, and he doesn't want to hear it. So I have to be reminded that he raised me, I didn't raise him, right? Okay. So we're going to have a panel come up here. Before we do, real quick, just tell me what you took away from this conversation, because I didn't give you instructions today. This was not an instructional session. This was I wanted you to think bigger session, okay? So tell me what you took away.
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that this is what you led with and that you're thinking this direction, because I've definitely been thinking about this. What is it that we do? Because it is so far beyond being a realtor that specializes with seniors and has senior mood management as part of that.
It's bigger. I'm going to repeat that for the audience at home. It's bigger than real estate. It's bigger than relocation or move management. It's way beyond that, if you care enough for it to be way beyond that. Yeah.
Because I've been thinking, what do I call myself? It seems like there needs to be a different label, and where's it going?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something as a group that those of us that want to pursue it that way, we've got to figure out.
Yeah.
And
well, and so it also, Catherine, here I'm going to just intervene on that. Do we need a mic, Chris, for the room? Okay. So, Catherine, let me just say this. I think, in my mind, I thought the same thing, and I thought, we could call ourselves legacy coaches, but would anybody even know what that meant? No, right? Yeah. Too hoity-toity, hidey-flighty. Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. Hairy-fairy, thank you. Okay, so do we really need to title it, though?
Yeah,
so this is what I'm saying. It's not the title. If you're not trying to market it, then you don't need a title. Really, it should be operating in the background all the time, and they should recognize something is different, but they don't need a label for it. Does that make sense? So when they say you're different, then that's your validation that you're doing something right, okay? So in NLP, one of the things we've learned is that, it's the way that you measure your success is on the response that you get, right? So we don't have to measure it on, whether or not we're getting validation, credit for it, right? It should just be happening in the background. Yeah, good. Who else had something? Yeah, Paul?
Touched on the importance of the year.
Yeah.
After somebody makes the transition, and I think it's critical that we do stay in that loop.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what we're learning is that the communities a lot of times don't.
Right.
We go to visit people that we're always there the day they move. We follow through.
Right.
And we were in one just on Monday, and I said, so so-and-so from the community, they've been over to see in your new home, right? No, we haven't seen them yet. They've been there a month.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think that they felt they feel abandoned.
Sure. We think we're handing them off to somebody who's going to pick up the ball and carry it, and they're not. They fumbled. Use the metaphor. Yeah, exactly. Don't make the assumption that somebody is following up. Yeah, Angela?
I took away a lot, and I want to thank you. My mom just turned 90, so I kind of feel like I went through that process with her. And no matter what you do, things can just turn out crazy anyway. So all we can do is our best.
That's right.
Yeah. So my mom is not where she stayed in denial because, of the Alzheimer's. But the family was the issue.
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
You do the best you can. Yeah. Right. Good job. Yeah, give her a hand, you guys. I think, you guys are going to hear from some folks on our panel this morning. And
when you hear, where's Martha and Johnny? Are they here? No? Yeah, there you are. Oh, Martha stepped out. Yeah, so Martha said something the other day that I'm sure she'll say. If she doesn't, remind her to talk about what your kids put on Facebook. Okay, good. All right. Okay, last comment.
Rob, and then we'll go to our panel.
Well, in the stages of readiness that were there, it kind of made me realize that I am a great coach when you get to the action plan here.
Yeah.
Because I've done that for years, and I know exactly what to say, and I don't always know what to say when they're in the other stages. So I'm trying to hurry them over to the action phase, rather than giving them what they need at this point in time.
Yeah.
What I need to be doing is having a coaching plan for each of the stages that are there.
Yeah. How many of you can relate to what he said? Yeah, everybody in the room, so you're not alone. And I think here's what I would say, guys. The coaching plan is this. First of all, be human. Be human. Right? Be a human being first, and then once you've, kind of created that human being relationship, then you have permission then to be real with people. And there is a coaching plan. We use it in the downsizing skills coaching program. And so there is a path for doing that.